Okay, I've moved us over to the main screen. Welcome everyone to All Core Devs 138. Um, Tons of merge stuff today, and then if we have time, there's some updates to what was 4938. Oh, Felix had a networking EIP he wanted to talk about, and then there's two other EIPs that wanted technical feedback. Hopefully we get through them. I guess first we had mainnet shadow fork 4 earlier this week. Perry, do you want to walk us through how that went?
Yeah, hey everyone. So we had mainnet shadow fork 2 yesterday. TTD was hit
4,
around.
right?
Yes, sorry, yeah, 4 exactly. We hit TTD around 4 p.m. and it was a relatively like nothing big happened. I think all the clients that were there before were also there after. We added a bunch of validators to minority clients that we didn't have in previous shadow forks, for example, like Bezu Lighthouse, etc., instead of purely just Bezu Prism, just so that we can track attestation and proposals. The one thing we noticed was the Nethermind team mentioned that a couple of client pairs are proposing empty execution payload. So we're getting proposals, but the proposal itself is an empty execution payload. I know they're talking about it and potentially have a fix. I think there was a Prism fix that they pushed yesterday. I've updated a few notes with it. But in general, it was a really good run. We did have an issue with Eragon syncing up, but that I think is an unrelated non-merge code base related issue.
Got it.
Did you end up getting Aragon synced? Or is
I think they're still not at head. I need to check up on them now. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are working on a new sync mode, and as Perry said, the issue is not related to the merge, or like so we have a fix, but it's not merge related.
So you have a fix for the issue that we saw?
Yes, for the we have this new sync mode which we are still debugging and like finishing and things like that. But the old sync mode it works fine.
Got it. Okay. Cool. And anyone from Nethermind want to chime in about like the empty blocks issues?
Yeah, so the problem is that still the timing issue that I mentioned many times. So, for example, Lodestar not giving enough time and Nimbus for block production. And because of that, we have empty blocks. And if we do not have empty blocks on something else, it is also probably something wrong. Yeah.
And as yesterday, I think Marius changed that behavior in Geth to be async, production of blocks on FCU, that would probably manifest on that code base too.
Yes, exactly. So that's coming in Geth too, to have the block production async, and then we should be also seeing empty blocks on Geth. So please, Nimbus and Lodestar, or Prism and Lodestar, I don't know, the clients that don't give us enough time, please fix this as soon as possible.
And for anyone listening, there's kind of like a prepare, like where you're saying, hey, execution engine, I'm going to ask for a block. And then you call and a little bit later and say, I want the block. And if you put those too closely, you know, you just get an empty block from the execution layer.
Got it. Anything else people wanted to discuss about the shadow fork itself? Okay, and then Perry, as I understand it, next week we are doing another mainnet shadow fork, but instead of using the client distributions that mirror mainnet, where there's obviously some like majority clients, we're gonna do kind of an equal split across CL and EL. Is that correct?
Exactly. We're just going to do an equal split, and I think the plans to have the configs out later today.
Awesome. Okay.
One thing maybe worth noting, just with the issue that was seen, if there are some amount of blocks that they do produce beacon blocks, but they don't have any transaction payloads, the elasticity for 1559 in that case, as long as it's not the majority of blocks, would allow for no reduction in capacity. So that would almost, be something we would want to fix if we saw it on mainnet, but would have been kind of a no op for users, which is nice.
Right, you get slightly slower inclusion, but you don't
Right,
reduce the
right.
throughput. Yeah.
But that would discourage client diversity.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean it's a good thing. I just mean that it's not that bad.
Anything else? Okay. Next up on the last call, Mikhail, you had a request for comment about like an engine API status response when the merge transition block is invalid. So I believe we just went with like the third option you proposed. Do you want to just give a quick update there?
Yeah, we just figured it out, and it's now in the spec. It's been merged like a few moments ago. So yeah, invalid terminal block hash is now replaced with the invalid status plus latest valid hash pointing to all zeros block hash. In this way, it's like less complexity for CL client side, and I don't think that it adds any complexity to EL as well. And also it helps to fix the blind spot, which is mentioned in the RFC that we previously had in the spec.
Cool. Any client teams have thoughts or comments on that?
I think, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the change is fine. It's just like I was a bit surprised that we did this change, and so like these changes should not come this late in the pipeline, and they also should be communicated better. Otherwise, I'm fine with this.
My one comment is to have Hive test for this change. Yeah, that is all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I agree. Anything that is being changed right now is primarily only related to edge case errors. But even in that case, I would prefer to not. I think it's at this point, we really need to be halting that.
Yes, I agree, but we had to have something here. Yeah, and it's been communicated. I know everyone is busy with engineering, so I understand that it didn't get too much attention, but anyway, it's been communicated in advance. And yes, we will have a Hive test for it. Basically, one of the, when the work on test was like on this checklist, on the test checklist, this blind spot has been discovered. That was the initial reason to have this kind of change.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just my thinking is that when do we finalize the engine API? So because for like will it be finalized for Opston or for which testnet? Because we should say, okay, this is we have merged all the pull requests that were under consideration. The engine API is final, like mark have a release. Give us some time to like double check that we do implement the final revision, because it's otherwise some things might, like with so many clients, we will get.
Yeah, I think we're at the place where we should probably put up a PR that's called a release candidate and not have anything go into it unless it's heavily discussed and noted by client teams. And that release candidate would probably stand until we're pulling the trigger on choosing mainnet. But I think that release candidate should be up for review pretty much now as we're trying to make decisions on Robston.
Are there other things that we anticipate needing to change with the engine API now?
I think it's more or less final. The right couple of things that, in terms of like clarification, so it's not like changing behavior or whatever, but I think we can do them shortly. So there were a couple of requests to clarify responses in some cases, and like safe block hash set to zeros should not be responded with any errors. This also should be clarified in the spec. But that's like that's not the update in behavior and in design. It's just clarifications. I think we can do them and then cut release.
Okay.
Straightforward.
So we don't expect any other kind of semantic changes, basically.
We don't, unless it's like necessary change.
Right. Obviously, if we find a bug or an error, but yeah. When do we think like we can have those small clarifications and then a release candidate? Can we do that like sometime next week, or does it? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely next week we can do this. I'll take care of these changes and then we can communicate and cut release next week, I guess, unless there are any other opinions.
Similarly, we'll cut a release candidate this coming week in the consensus specs as well.
And I don't think anything has changed in the execution specs for like 4 months now. There's 2 EIPs in it.
Yeah, EIPs are pretty stable.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on the engine API? Okay. The other thing that we did finalize was this discussion over the JSON RPC finalized and safe tags. Mikhail, do you want to also give a quick update on that?
Sure. So there are 2 new block tags that we have added to the ETH namespace. So we had the earliest, latest, and pending, right? And now we have all this, and also finalized and safe, in addition to the previous ones. There was a discussion to have unsafe and the alias latest to unsafe. So yeah, we decided not to introduce unsafe at all. So it's now latest will always point to the head of the chain as it's been previously, all the way. One thing here is that execution layer clients should respond with error, and this error is specified in this change, in this PR. EL clients should respond with error if if safe or finalized blocks are queried before the transition gets finalized. That's one thing that's worth mentioning.
Any thoughts, comments on that? Okay. Okay. Next up, so yeah, we are kind of getting close to testnets. And then one thing to note there is that while Goerli has an existing beacon chain associated with it, Prater, Sepolia and Ropsten do not. And there's been some discussions over the past couple of weeks about like how do we structure those chains. Danny and Perry, I know you've thought a lot about this week. Do you want to give kind of a quick update of what you're thinking for both Ropsten and Sepolia at this point?
Yeah. So first of all, naming wise, I think we should just call them Ropsten Beacon Chain and Sepolia Beacon Chain, and the unification of the networks after is just Ropsten and Sepolia. I think that's easy. The Ropsten, as far as I understand, will be support would be deprecated probably after this, in the order of some amount of months. And so doing that, there's two options. One would be, have a conservative size validator set, just kind of get it up, get it going, with an open validator set, or do a permissioned validator set with the ERC20 contract. Based on some discussions, I think doing an open one is most beneficial to the community, and we can start with just 100,000 validators that we control, and community members can add, and it would be unlikely that the community members would add so much that it would disrupt the stable backbone that we've added. Ropsten, I think, is going to be the first testnet fork, so we really should get this beacon chain up in the next couple of weeks. And then Sepolia beacon chain, I think the idea would be to do a 2x validator set size in comparison to mainnet today, also make it unpermissioned so that other people can jump in. This would give us the chance to, or was it permissioned? I'll let Perry chime in, but this would give us the chance to kind of see if anything shakes out with such a large validator set. Prater, which will become Goerli, is about the same size as mainnet, and we try to track it. Borley, okay. We try to track that. So pretty much we need to launch 2 beacon chains. The Ropsten one will be unpermissioned. Hopefully people will join. I believe the Sepolia one will be unpermissioned as well, but I can't remember. Perry, did we have one way or the other we were thinking there?
Yeah, we were thinking we can use the token contract, so it'll be permissioned, but we can just
got it.
open up a
No, that's
faucet for
fine.
the token. Yeah.
Right. And one of the reasons we might permission that one is to do random testing on it, in the event that we want to turn off half the validators or have a more controlled environment. I think the thing that we'll do is pretty much have suggested configs, have suggested distribution of validators, and kind of make the rounds and get quick thumbs up, and have teams join us in kicking off these beacon chains.
Yeah, the main thing that's still, so with Ropsten, I agree, it's pretty much straightforward. We can start with something that's like 100K and people can join in. Should be relatively easy to set up. And anyway, it's going to be deprecated in a few weeks, months, so we don't have to worry about it too much. But the one I would like to discuss and get some consensus on is Sepolia. We essentially have 2 options. Either we want a large beacon chain there or a small beacon chain. A large beacon chain means that we essentially save Goerli ether because we don't have to keep growing Prater. If we go with a small beacon chain for Sepolia, then we're going to continue to eat up a decent amount of Goerli ether. And that's mainly because we want to continue growing Prater to keep up with mainnet.
Right. So Sepolia, if it's big, becomes kind of our mainnet plus testing environment.
Exactly. And the question then would be, if we have a really large beacon chain for Sequoia, that means client teams have to now run 2 times a decent number of validators, and I have no idea how open they are to that.
Yeah, to answer your question, Justin, I mean, I think most client types can handle thousands of validators per node. I don't know. I mean, you can also throw more resources at a node and handle lots of validators per node. So we don't have to spread them necessarily too widely. I don't think it looks much different than what you would do on Prater today.
Yeah, definitely. It wouldn't be that different from what we have from Prater today.
Given we have Afri on the call, and you came on Afri a few weeks ago to talk about the issues around Gordy Ether, do you have any thoughts about like if we should keep Prater / Bordy as the large beacon chain, if that negatively like affects Gordy in other ways? Yeah. Assuming, oh yes.
Yes, sure. I mean, Gurley and Prata is already fairly big. It has a lot of users and has a lot of validators. Sepolia is kind of still very unknown, so there's no, we don't have a beacon chain yet, and we don't have many users building on Sepolia yet, naturally. We have to keep in mind that we are deprecating a lot of testnets in the coming months or years. So I would be, my personal opinion is that we should use Sepolia as like a fairly stable application developer testnet, because it's fairly new and we still have the time or the chance to define how the consensus layer would look like, or the Sepolia beacon chain would look like. And I would personally just keep it simple for this network. And I would personally say that we should continue growing Prata. But that again, it's not that easy because we have a limited supply of Gurley Ether. But putting this aside, the main reason why we should grow Prata and Gurley is because it's already fairly big, and we have a lot of much more interesting foundation for testing and for growing this network. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. If you see it as a positive, I think it's, yeah, that seemed like the biggest like reason to not have a large beacon chain.
Exactly. I think that was the biggest point. If we wanted to save on Gurley Ether, it makes sense to have a big one on Sepoia. But I also agree we can have a really stable permission consensus engine and have Sepoia to be quite rock solid.
Yeah, that was my original intuition. And then was convinced to maybe do the 2x. I think that's totally fine to do a smaller permission, very stable net, something that like kind of feels like click to end users that doesn't have deadlocks. And there are a number of kind of emerging ways for us to test load across many nodes they're more in like transient type test nets and not public test nets. So if we do want to test 2x, 4x, 8x beacon chain sizes, that we might instead just kind of take it into those test environments rather than on these public test nets.
Quick question: if we were to do the token beacon chain, this might interfere with withdrawal testing, right? Or
no, it's independent. So it's very transparent to the beacon chain. It has the same interfaces as the deposit contract, and then withdrawals are totally unrelated to the deposit mechanism. So I think it will be totally fine.
Oh, right. I'm stupid. Sorry. But yeah. But doing it this way on Gurley, if we were to do the token deposits on Gurley, we could create new Gurley ETH. We could inflate Gurley ETH with the withdrawals, but
we'd have to like hard. Wait, what was the suggestion? token
Yeah,
deposits
but
on
like
Gold.
but it doesn't make sense to throw away Prater anyway. So
And there is a separate
just ignore
suggestion
what I said.
for. I guess one interesting thing though, there was a suggestion to like upgrade Gordy to give the clique signers a huge amount of ETH or Gordy ETH. I guess you can still do that even after the merge on Gordy because you still know the accounts. But it's kind of weird because you're like, it's like a retroactive thing. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on the beacon chains?
How long would it take to set it up?
Yeah, I was
Harry?
thinking of maybe setting it up on Monday or Tuesday so clients could already bake in releases. But we need to figure out some timelines for that. As in when does Genesis happen?
Right. And yeah, and not only Genesis, but also how we want to run through Altair and Bellatrix, right?
Right. I would suggest on Robson, we just kind of like make it happen very quickly in the sequence of the initial 2000 epochs. And then maybe for the Sepolia one, plan it a bit more like it's an event. It's a thing that's happening. Run your node before it happens.
Okay, for the Sepolia and then the Gordy.
Yeah, so on Robson, just kind of like yeah, Gorley we'd have to schedule anyway. So anyone running Gorley currently would have to upgrade their node for the Bellatrix fork.
Right. And then that means that if on Robson we want this close kind of upgrade of Genesis, Altair, Bellatrix, we need the TTD for the Bellatrix upgrade, correct?
Right. I guess you would want to know it at that point in time.
Right. So if you have a single release,
nodes upgraded again.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if that is a complicating factor, then you just launch the Robson network now, and then shift it to the upgrades when you know. But yeah. But I guess that would the distinction on what to do there, I would defer to when we're having a Robson upgrade conversation, which I think we're having soon.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, just before we go there, any other like concerns or thought about the general architecture or setup of the two beacon chains? Okay. Okay, yeah, Perry, thanks for the summary in the chat. So Robson is 100K validators plus unpermissioned for people to join, and Sepolia will be more like 20K and then be permissioned, probably with an option for people to join as well, if maybe like not as easy.
Yeah, exactly. We'd have a bunch of tokens, and whoever wants to join needs to ask us for tokens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but then more stable, obviously. Great. Okay, so yeah, I guess you know, on the last call we kind of briefly talked about Robson, and I over the past 2 weeks, like I've tried to talk with the different client teams and testing teams, and it seems like my general impression is like client teams don't have like quite stable releases yet, where there's still like some kind of open issues that they're looking at. There's still kind of some failing Hive tests here and there, and so it's clearly not like a spot where the code we would deploy today is what would go on mainnet. That said, Robson is basically like a kind of testnet we intend to deprecate. And one thing we also talked about in the past is because these upgrades are like a bit more hands-on for node operators, where previously they would just like download a new version of whatever client they're running and upgrade that. Now they need to like figure out, running an EL and a CL in parallel, and making sure that like that whole setup works and that their infrastructure still works and whatnot. It might be worth moving to like Ropsten a bit quicker than we otherwise would, because then you get people like you give people like another chance to try the software and make sure that the overall setup works. Even though obviously like what's going on what would go on Ropsten is not what would end up going on mainnet. We'd probably still have like some bug fixes and whatnot. So I guess I'm curious, how do people generally feel about that? Do we feel like it makes sense to do Ropsten, even though we're, still kind of working heavily on testing? Do we prefer to wait to do Ropsten? And then the risk there is potentially, we might have to push back to Bomb, but that might still happen, obviously, if we find an issue, a critical issue at any point in the process. So yeah, curious how people feel about that.
So Nethermind is fine. The only potential issue is that it will take us a bit to release a version that we could use on Ropsten. So depending on the date, we might release version, let's say, a little bit late, of course, before the merge on Ropsten, but a little bit later than usual.
Okay. And what does late mean, just to get like a rough feeling?
I think it would be in 2 to 3 weeks we can release a version that we would go to Ropsten. 2 weeks is probably doable,
Okay.
but not like in a week,
okay.
Not like in a few days.
Okay.
So for Geth, we want to create a release anyway next week, and if we have the TTD for Ropsten, we can bake it in. There are a couple of open PRs still to merge for the merge stuff, but those are only like minor issues that were found by Hive, and so it's like not really relevant to the node operation and to the testnets, and so we can bake them into the release, or we can also just release them in the release afterwards.
Peter, I see your hand is also up.
So just wanted to add that also I kind of agree with what you've said previously, Tim, that this hard fork is a bit special in that all operators need to do a lot of extra work to figure it out and to set it up. So I am very, very supportive of the idea of forking Ropsten, let the shit hit the fan, and so that everybody kind of figures out what it actually means to be part of this merge network, and then see where we go with the rest. So I think it's a good idea to fork Ropsten early before making any commitments on the other ones.
Got it. One thing I'll also add on that front is I think for mainnet, there's a world where like the hash rate is, potentially going down and whatnot, and we may want to fork, like to have the TTD happen quicker than like the block times we set usually happen. So I think that the thing we also want is like to train people in a way so that when mainnet comes, they're able to upgrade relatively quickly and maybe a bit more than like in a normal upgrade, just because it's hard to estimate the TTD, especially in a world where the hash rate is all messed up. Besu, Aragon, any thoughts?
Yeah, Besu, similar to Geth, we have a release, regular scheduled release next week, and if we have TTD configs, we should be able to bake Ropsten merge into those configs. We also have some failing Hive tests that we're working on, so we want to get those as sorted out as quickly as possible. Our release is planned for Wednesday of next week, so depending on when we have TTD configs, I think we should be able to get that baked in.
Okay, sorry, Maris, you were going to say something as well?
Yeah, it's really unrelated, but I think we should think about moving the Sepolia fork up a bit, because it's relatively hard for solo stakers to set up nodes on Robston and Gurley because they have to sync so much, and like giving them the ability to test on a newish testnet so that they don't have to sync too much might be a good idea.
So you would do like Sepolia before Gordy or even before Robston?
No, I would do Sepolia before Gurley.
Okay. Okay, we can definitely consider that. Yeah, once Robston has survived the merged. Aragon, any thoughts?
Well, next week I'm on holiday, so we can. We still have quite a few things missing or like not fully implemented for the merge. So we haven't updated. We haven't updated to the very latest engine API, and also we have a lot of tests failing in Hive because what's the click mining is not set up there, and also I haven't fully tested our sync performance. It's quite a few things, but we can provide a kind of a raw alpha version if the TTD is known.
Okay. And I'm curious on the CL side, like I see there's like some Prismatic people here. I don't know if there's any other CL team present. There's more people than can fit on a Zoom screen right now. But yeah, anyone from the CL side have thoughts?
I pretty much agree with what everyone said. So yeah, no thought on my end. I don't have direct answers from the rest of the teams, but we have talked as though this was very likely to be the next step and to happen around now. So I don't expect much pushback or any pushback.
Yeah, no issue from Teku side, I think.
Okay. And so I guess does it make a difference? Like, so it seems like Geth and Besu can pretty much release something next week without too much issues. Nethermind still needs like a bit more time, and then Aragon will either release something like right now or then also needs more time. Does it make like a difference if we choose the TTD today or like in the next, basically in the CL call next week? Like, does having one extra week before you know the TTD, and then we can put out a release which combines everything, does that help people or does that not really make a difference? So it's like if we choose it now and have a release next week versus choosing it next week along with a slot, I guess, for Bellatrix in the CL call, and then having you release like the week after, so like 2 weeks from now. Yeah, does that like move the needle for people or increase the confidence, or is it kind of all the same? And we should just.
I don't think it makes sense to not choose TTD right now. We can always if we want to have releases out in 2 weeks, then we can have releases out in 2 weeks. But like choosing the TTD next week is just really weird to me. So we should choose it right now and either decide to have the releases out by next week or by the week after. But like artificially postponing the decision to choose to TTD doesn't make sense to me. at the moment.
Okay. Andrew, you have your hands up as well.
Yeah, I would prefer to have a 2 weeks window for the release because, as I mentioned, next week I am on holiday and I'm not going to work on anything. Like maybe like only TTD, the bare minimum. So another week would be helpful.
And that's knowing the TTD or just having the other week to ship the release? Like if we choose it now and
just another week to ship a release.
yeah. Peter?
So with regard to picking a TTD, I think we might as well do it. I mean, there's no harm really. The only catch is that Ropsten is fairly easy to attack, so to say.
Yeah.
Meaning that if you pick a TTD now and somebody just starts GPU mining with, say, 4 GPUs, then that TTD might arrive tomorrow or something. So we need to also have a contingency on what happens if somebody goes crazy.
Right. So basically, it's what happens if we think the TTD is going to get hit before the Bellatrix slot gets hit, and then we need like an emergency TTD override.
The Bellatrix slot. I mean, we plan on just launching this beacon chain, right? So we just need to launch the beacon chain before we hit TTD.
Oh, right.
Exactly.
So, but hold on. That's not a problem, is it? It will just mean that the clients pause. What would be a problem would be if we hit the TTD before we've actually made the release, before clients have been released. So
right.
Yes.
Otherwise,
that
it'd just
would
be a
problematic.
liveness failure on
Yeah.
Ropsten, which is fine.
Liveless
It's
failure.
not bad.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess.
I mean.
Oh, go ahead, Peter. Sorry.
So if we, I mean, in theory, it's fine to hit the TTD before the beacon thingy, but if we're going to hit the TTD 4 days before the beacon chain launches, then you're going to have so many siblings at the top, so many sibling TTDs, and essentially when you launch the beacon chain, everybody will be on their own little chain.
Will there be a bunch of sibling TTDs? Would the miners keep mining, or would they just stop mining?
I mean, I will make one just for the fun of it.
Yeah, we have
but you might
of the
if you don't
miners on this call.
Right, but if you're running a Ropsten miner, it's just going to keep building on a single chain, likely, rather than making 100 little fork chains around TTD.
So if you're running stock get code at least, then your miner will, as far as I know, will stop mining and will. Actually, that's a good question. I have no idea.
No, I meant if you're a miner and you don't run the upgrade, which is the only reason you would stop. You wouldn't stop.
No, you would mine the proof of work chain. You would continue.
Yeah. Which would create a really nice stable TTD for everyone else.
Okay. So once we have the releases out, there's like the blog post on the EF blog. How long do we think we want to give people to upgrade their Ropsten nodes? Like, so we're basically like, So say like 2 weeks from now, we have a blog post that goes up and says these are the versions for Ropsten. Is like another 2 weeks before we hit TTD sufficient for people?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. Nobody really. Okay, apologies if I offended anyone. Nobody really uses Ropsten.
Okay.
So I think it's time to be a bit aggressive and to YOLO it a bit just to get things rolling.
Oh, Mikhail?
On the related topic, I would just like to remind people about fork next value. If we are deciding about forking Ropsten, I think it's also need to be decided what to use for the fork next value.
Oh, so that means you basically disconnect the peers. This is like for the fork ID, right?
Right.
So in theory, you shouldn't make any decisions based on the merge fork block. I know that in the past, some clients have implemented some stuff differently, like except for the fork ID change. And so we can set the merge fork block either before or after the actual fork. So
Yeah, it's also important to notice that the fork next, it was kind of like invented for this world where forks are scheduled at a specific block. So it might be better to ignore, like to not set it for the merge fork, like at all.
Felix, we have a merge fork block specifically. That is not the fork where the merge actually happens, but that is only for the to split the networks afterwards.
Mm.
And do we want to set that before, like in the release for the merge, or in the release after the merge has happened and we know what the actual terminal block hash is?
It needs to be after. Yeah, we need to know what the block was.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to know what the block was.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes sense to set it before.
We were discussing one reason to set it before is it will force users to upgrade their nodes because they will see that they are starting to lose connections like with other peers. But I don't know if like this is valuable to do, and I don't know if it will work as it's been discussed.
And like the downside to it is that you will alienate all the people that are not upgrading, and this might include miners. So miners might be forked off from the network, and so I think it's very little gain for a potential bad situation.
Martin, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question / thought. So if we set fork next to a high value, that won't split the network, will it, until that high value has been hit? Because I was wondering if there might be any value in setting a fork next to some high value, just so that we more easily can determine on a peer-to-peer protocol level kind of how large percentage of the network is upgraded. Just
yeah, I can see that being an extra problem.
High value meaning like, I don't know, 6 months from now?
No, I mean, like for Robson, we do the release, and then we can get a kind of good estimate by just connecting to 100 peers and checking how many signal this new fork ID next, and know how large percentage of the network is upgraded.
Right, but I think
otherwise we would have
how big do you just, like, how far in the future do you pick the block? You just pick like a random block?
Yeah, I would estimate it like,
I mean, you could put it to 3 years in the future.
Yeah.
But would it maybe be valuable to put it like plus 2 months past what we think TTD is, so that it actually does take an effect?
Probably more.
People upgrading.
Because if we ever do hit that, then we will actually cause a split. So we should, I mean, if we use it only for that purpose, then we should set it to like 3 years in the future, so that we know that 3 years from now, people use a different software where we have kind of disabled this or not have this.
But the point is actually to have that split the network. So that's the entire point. Otherwise, why not disable it altogether if you're going to send 3 years into the future?
Right, but we don't know until after the fork what number to set, right? So when we do the next release, we can set the fork ID to whatever it was.
I mean, you can just punch it and set it to, I mean, if you set it 2 months in the future, there's no way you're going to reach that. I mean, somebody might attack Robson and might do months worth of blocks. That seems a bit excessive, but definitely won't be able to do it on any of the test network.
Andrew, you had your hand up a while.
Yeah, I think as far as I understand it, if we set it too far into the future, then it won't cause a split, and we already see this happening on shadow forks. So for the mainnet, I would think we should set it to something happening reasonably soon after the TTD is reached, like maybe 2 weeks or something, like 1 week after.
But that means that, am I right in saying that means that miners then need to upgrade their nodes?
Well, if it happens after the merge, then they don't need to upgrade.
Because you don't disconnect peers until that block has actually been hit, correct?
Right. Well, ideally, you would want to set it like maybe an hour after after the merge, but how can you be sure?
Decision.
What if, is it possible to change fork ID to actually be based on the TTD rather than?
No.
No, it's not really designed into it, yeah. So it's designed to be a block number, and we cannot change the definition now because all the other software also publishes as a block number.
Yeah.
We could make we could make a new version of the sort of like ETH ENR entry and things like that. Like we could just create, like we can create a new system that like works a bit different, but then it won't really be supported by the older software. So it's like the goal. This is, we know that all of the nodes right now that implement the protocol behave according to the previous definition, and it's this one that is given in the EIP also with the rules, and they are based on the block number. So
yeah, and we'd also be doing all of this work basically just for one time, right? Like there's no like we're not, after the merge, basically we're not going to need this because you can keep using your block number. So it seems like, it just seems like a lot of work to basically solve for this edge case.
Does this block number need to be hard-coded? Can we just, like, when we finalize the transition block, can we just use this as dynamic fork ID?
No. So the problem with fork IDs is that the moment the fork passes, the block number all of a sudden it gets enforced. And anyone who tries to connect to you and saying that, let's say they are up to date with the network, but they don't know about this.
And so given that, and it probably means that you want people to retroactively upgrade the fork ID kind of at the same time, does it make sense to target a block number that's at least over a year out, so that when we have the next hard fork after the merge, we can update both fork IDs, so we can like update this fake one and we can update the real one to whatever the next fork block will be. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, if you have clients like changing it right after the merge and they don't already put out releases at the same time, like basically we're not coordinating a hard fork, then you might see some weird stuff happening there.
this is kind of what we were saying, right? So it's okay, I think, to basically let's just try and work around the fork ID for the merge. So the consensus that I'm hearing is the fork ID will just, like, it's a potential source of trouble with the merge, and it's also not possible to set the block number. So we just kind of want to ignore the fork ID for the merge, and like, why should we set it at all to something for the merge then?
Well,
like
in order to like disconnect from the nodes, from the unupdated nodes quickly.
But you won't
after the merge.
Like
if we were to schedule a new fork 1 or 2 months after potential TTD, then this would happen, right?
Sure, but also 1 or 2 months is like way too long of a delay to fix the. Like,
yeah, why not just make
Sorry,
so basically, I think the fork ID will not help us with the merge.
Yeah.
So basically, we should just try to get the fork ID out of the way for the merge. it's not a regular hard fork in that sense. So it cannot, it should just not have the, we should just not use the fork ID. It's not possible to schedule it correctly. And we will just schedule it for the next fork again. And if the merge goes really well, we just schedule like the next fork very soon. And I mean, people will be, I think, very ready to upgrade their nodes after the merge. Like, I mean, we will see. The people who will upgrade for the merge will also upgrade for the fork after, I think. And this fork can literally only be about, I don't know, probably something has to be fixed anyway. And then, you know, we can schedule it by the block number and make the fork ID, and everything will be fine again. But I think for specifically for the merge, since it is not scheduled by the block number, the fork ID system cannot help at all. It was designed with the specific goal of like providing what it does when the fork is scheduled at a specific number.
Danny?
Yeah, so there is potential value in being able to crawl and know what nodes have upgraded and what nodes haven't.
But we can do that with the graffitis and the client versions, right?
You tell me on the client version. Graffiti, not necessarily.
That's what Ethernodes does. They look at like if client version is bigger than X across every client.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then that's fine. I also think it's not necessarily unsafe if we do want to quickly upgrade this after, to just firmly put it plus 3 months of what we think the longest TTD would be, and then you get the natural segmentation after anyway, without having to upgrade the nodes again. I don't really care. I think that that's like relatively clean, but otherwise it's fine to also just do nothing.
Jamie?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a kind of counterintuitive aspect of the fork ID when it's added that was found working on Nimbus. When you add a next fork ID, it's not true that all of the nodes that haven't upgraded will sync up to that fork ID, the block, I mean, of that fork ID. If they're sufficiently far behind, they actually stop syncing at the previous fork ID. So we had a situation where once London was passed and everybody else had reached consensus on London, when we were running software that didn't know about London, it actually only synced up to Berlin, and then it wasn't able to connect to nodes after that. So it's perhaps just something to keep in mind, because you mentioned earlier that you believed all the nodes that haven't upgraded will keep syncing up until the next block associated with fork ID. It doesn't always work that way.
Got it.
Is there some argument against what Danny suggested? Just set the fork ID to 3 months after whatever we think the longest out is.
Well, the problem is that you have a lot of, like, we observed it on shadow forks, and for some reason, when you ask for a certain header by hash, you get incorrectly, I don't know who sends it, but you have headers from the wrong shadow fork, or like from the mainnet when you're on shadow fork, and so on. So, and that happens because on shadow forks, the merge block is set so far into the future that it doesn't cause a split. So if we set it to plus 3 months, we'll have for 3 months, if we don't do anything, we'll have this weird situation when you have peers from both proof of work and proof of stake.
I see. So if I'm understanding correctly, there's basically 3 options. One, we don't use the fork ID at all, and which would still result in the same problem that you just described. Or we set the fork ID 3 months in advance, in which case we have 3 months of that problem. Or we do like a quick upgrade right after TTD and set it, or do some sort of manual workaround so that we don't have that problem at all. Is that accurate?
Well, we can try to calculate it so that it happens like plus 2 weeks, and then, but then
that, like, I think trying to calculate it plus 2 weeks is a bit dangerous, because we don't want to have have it before the fork, because we don't want the majority of miners to drop off before the fork. So I would say let's do something like plus 1 month, plus 2 months, and that's it. And that's basically been the idea from the beginning.
Lucas, your hand is up.
Yeah, so we still have this issue somewhat in shadow forks. When we try to sync, we were trying to sync from wrong peers. So our workaround there was to, when we connect to the peers, ask about of one of the latest blocks we got from Beacon Chain about the hash if they have it, and just disconnect if they don't. So that's kind of a workaround, that we disconnect peers without those.
Doesn't that mean that you can't sync from peers that are currently syncing?
Yes, to some extent. Depends on their sync stage.
Yeah, sure.
Also, these issues on the shadow forks are only this like harsh because you have like 100 nodes on each shadow fork, but you have like thousands of nodes on mainnet. If you turn it around, and like most of the nodes are actually having the canonical chain, then you won't have these issues syncing from the wrong peers.
Yeah, but I'm concerned because upgrading this time around is so much harder. I have a small fear in the back of my head that we will have significantly more people that don't upgrade correctly or don't upgrade at all, just because it's hard this time. Whereas previously, as you know, just update your Docker image, update your package, whatever. Now it's like, oh, I got to do a bunch of work. Maybe I'll just put that off and not do it. And so I'm concerned we might end up with actually a significant number of nodes not updated.
So to clarify, we're asking only about the header. So currently, after the merge, everyone starts with syncing the headers, like backwards probably. So that's, we don't really disconnect anyone. That's only after the merge chain in practice.
Just to kind of try and wrap this up, does it make sense to try to just do nothing with the fork ID on Ropsten, see how that goes, and if we see that like it raises a bunch of issues, we can then try and do like a plus 3 month thing on Gordy and Sepolia and see how that goes. I think like Micah, like your concern about people not upgrading will be at its truest on Ropsten, because this is where people have the least incentive to actually upgrade their nodes. So like if it's all right on Ropsten and it doesn't cause any significant issues, you would think on mainnet it would also be right, because the stakes are kind of higher for people to monitor that network.
If I understand correctly, we've already seen the problems it caused, and we know there's going to be problems, right?
On mainnet shadow forks though, which are very different, because mainnet shadow forks, there's like 100 nodes that we control and like thousands of nodes that we don't. And so that means that just like statistically, the peers we get are all on the wrong fork from the shadows forks perspective, which won't be true. It might be true on Ropsten to like a 50-50 degree, but not to like 95-1 degree. Yeah.
I hear you saying. My gut tells me that having two peer-to-peer networks that are incompatible with each other, that don't have a way to distinguish between each other, is likely to cause problems that we may not even foresee until mainnet, or may not hit until mainnet. And so I'm hesitant to just kind of YOLO and just hope we don't run into the thing. But that's just a gut thing. I don't have any actual evidence.
Yeah, that's exactly why we don't want to have the fork before mainnet, before TTD hits. We want to have the fork after TTD hits, so that we have the split network post TTD.
Hypothetically,
I would just say let's shelve this discussion for now. Let's just say we're not going to schedule a merge fork block on Ropsten. We're only going to do the TTD one, and I don't know, Geth never had issues finding a good peer and syncing from them. So yeah,
Does
but
anyone...
we can like.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm finished.
So the only reason I would push back on that a little bit, and this is pretty weak, is just that if the final solution we come to involves doing something other than just setting a number, like if we decide to write some extra code, I would really like to see that tested on Ropsten. And so not deciding until later, kind of, I feel like will cut out a handful of potential solutions, whatever this may be.
Yeah.
We are not going to do anything except for setting this number.
Yeah, I would not write extra custom code that we're testing super late in the process on like zero of the shadow, or like the minority of the shadow forks. That seems like the most error prone thing. Okay. Okay, so any other strong opinions against doing nothing on Ropsten for now and seeing how it goes? Okay, sold. So no fork next value on Ropsten. And then back to the TTD discussion. So if we say we want the releases for Ropsten 2 weeks from now, so that's like the week of May 23rd. That means then we give people kind of 2 weeks to upgrade their nodes. So that means we want to like have the fork happen on Ropsten the week of June 6th. We had someone on our team, Mario Havel, kind of try to estimate TTDs on mainnet and Ropsten for a while now. He tried a bunch of different models, and this is just like a simple polynomial regression. And that seems to work the best, and it seems to work relatively well up to like a month out. So I would just suggest that we go to like the June 8th value, which is roughly in the middle of that week. And this gives us this TTD value, which I'll paste here. Anyone have an issue with that? We can make it look like a palindrome if people really want that. But otherwise, also happy to just go with this estimate. I'll also share the GitHub repo in the chat here in case people want to have a look more. Yeah, good question. TTD is terminal total difficulty. It's the total difficulty value on the proof of work chain at which we trigger the transition to proof of stake. And so the one I posted in the chat here is the one that would happen on June 8th, which is basically 4 weeks from now. And so it gives us 2 weeks for the client releases, and then 2 weeks for people to upgrade their nodes to a release that contains this value.
So as was brought up earlier, scheduling the Ropsten fork far in advance risks someone trolling us and hitting it, next week or tomorrow.
In that case, we need to do a TTD override, but I don't know that there's a way we can get around this. Because that can be true like as soon as the blog post is out. If we give people 2 weeks anyways, it's always going to be the same problem.
I mean, one option would be to just use the override exclusively for Ropsten. Like we just say, we're going to do an override. We'll tell you what the TTD is, 3 days before June 8th.
I think that's really bad because then we don't exercise the real path.
I see what you did there, Marius.
Yes. Basically, that's exactly what we
win.
Yeah. That's exactly what we did on what we do on the shadow forks, and I think there might be a bunch of issues there.
Yeah. Okay. You win. I concede.
Andrew, do you have a
Well, my preference would be to postpone it to the TTD to the 15th of June. But if everybody thinks that it should be the 8th, I'm okay with that. But my preference would be the 15th.
Anyone have a strong preference either way?
I have a weak preference for 15th.
I have a medium preference for 8th.
Besu?
Medium preference for the 8th.
Weak preference for the 8th, but yeah, guess as well. So Marius already.
What are the reasonings for 8th versus 15th? Like, why are people preferring one versus the other?
Mostly
The
scheduling.
earlier
From my perspective, the very first testnet wouldn't merge until June. That's definitely getting us into territory where we would need to push a difficulty bomb, in my opinion.
That's probably true, but I don't think that pushing the difficulty bomb is that bad. It gives us more time to prepare a release, like a better release, and more time for testing. But I don't insist. If the majority thinks it should be the 8th, then it's all right.
So I would agree, but my view is that this is testing. If it were, I don't consider ROPS a production network. It's a test network. So therefore, I think the sooner the better, because it gives us better testing for when it's for the real thing.
Anyone else have thoughts?
Mine is the same as Andrew. I still see work before us, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So the more time we have to polish the release, the better for us, but 8th is doable. And also, I don't see a problem delaying difficulty bomb when we are already going to testnets if it's a short delay, but except it is a little bit additional work and scheduling. But I don't see this as that big issue, but that's just opinion that might not be correct.
I guess one objection against delaying the difficulty bomb is that it will imply that the miners will have to update, and what if there is a revolt among the miners?
Right, yeah, they do need to run.
Yeah, so from my perspective, just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, us pushing the difficulty bomb indicates that we are going to delay the merge, which is good for them. And so that feels like something they would be on board with.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I can see both sides of this. And so okay, so if we did do like the June 15 rather than the June 8, it also means I guess both for like Nethermind and Aragon, you also want to delay by 1 week when we actually announce the releases, right? Because it's not just announcing the releases and having 3 weeks to hit Robston. It's more like we announce the releases 1 week later, and instead of announcing those releases in 2 weeks, we announce them in 3 weeks, and then we hit Robston 2 weeks after that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
There's like a weak majority in favor of June 8th. Yeah, I don't know. Get Besu, do you have any updated thoughts?
Still June 8th, weekly held. I like the palindromic TTD after he's already put the effort in.
Yeah. Okay, and Teku would also like the June 8th. Anyway, I think Ben, you're the only CL representative left. if that's correct.
And how about Danny?
Danny left. I think Danny favors. I can vouch that Danny would prefer earlier rather than later. I don't know if that's his personal preference or the aggregated preference of like CL teams. Yep. So I think, I don't know, I would also slightly land on like June 8th. And one of the reasons here is we can definitely upgrade the releases that like clients put out. And we've done that in the past, even for like mainnet. If you look at the London blog post fork, there's like a couple scratched out releases. So I think if there are going to be some clients and like most of them that are ready, and if Nethermind and Aragon have like a release that's maybe not like the one that they would prefer, we can kind of start with those. And then if like a week later, Aragon and Nethermind have like an updated release, we can definitely like just upgrade the blog post and communicate that. And I also think like if one of the things we do want to test is like people configuring their nodes, then if we do, like the sooner the better, I think is good there, because we might find some issues that we're not aware of about just people running these client combos. And it's something where like I think the fact that the release is like a bit more polished probably is not like a huge deal breaker. So my weak preference is also I would rather get this into the hands of people to like try the like combinations as soon as possible, and then just like make sure that we also upgrade the release versions for Nethermind and Aragon as soon as there's like a new one. I don't know. Does that generally make sense?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Marek, Lucas. Okay. Okay, so thank you, Afri, for the palindrome, which I was too tired to recognize. So I'll copy paste it here. I'll copy paste it here. I'll just share it in all core devs right now. So consider this the TTD value. I'll make it a proper upgrade to the Shanghai spec in the execution repo. And the thing that clients on the CL side need to figure out in the next week is basically the slot heights for, well, basically the Genesis for the beacon chain, and then the slot heights for Altair and Bellatrix based on this. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Marius. Okay. So there's 3 people who wanted to discuss EIPs that are on the call. I doubt we can get through all of them, but if we stay on an additional 5 minutes, we can give them each 5 minutes. Yeah. So first up, Felix, you had EIP 44938.
Yes, so, and this can be really quick. So this is already like pre-agreed. I just wanted to let you guys know that for formal reasons, we are pursuing this EIP. The EIP 4938 is about removing the get node data message from the ETH wire protocol. And we have discussed this extensively with all client teams that we are aware of. That we want to make this change in Geth, and we have been wanting to make this change in Geth for a very long time. And I can only really repeat what is in the EIP. We are set on making this change because it will allow us to, for example, restructure our database to not store all of the trinodes, for example, by their hashes. And we do provide an alternative to this protocol message in the Snap protocol. And all of the existing users of get node data can be replaced by the messages in the Snap protocol. So it is not, can I just very quickly get from the client implementer some signal that this is okay?
Okay, from Aragon.
Yeah.
I think Nethermind still uses get node data for fast sync.
We're currently using it for healing. There is work being done to move to SnapSync healing, but it's not done yet.
Yeah.
And I guess Bisu will keep
Yeah,
it for their other networks.
Yeah, presumably we would be keeping that for. We should probably get back to you on that actually, because the SnapSync implementation that we have is pretty solid, but it's not really production ready yet. So we probably want to discuss before we have an opinion.
So what I wanted to say here is that even if there is no need to implement the complete SnapSync algorithm to use the Snap protocol for this purpose. Basically, this is just for us like a way to say that we want to roll out this new protocol version ETH67, which will not have get node data. It doesn't mean that ETH66 will go away immediately. We will keep having ETH66 for a while, because phasing out the protocol version, it takes a good while. So all we just really want to do is basically move forward and define the protocol version 67, which does not have the message. And then later we will remove version 66, and then it will become unavailable. So for the time being, ETH66 will be served by Geth. And I mean, I'm not sure, I guess all the other clients will serve it in the same way that they have been serving it already. For example, in some clients like Aragon, the message is not implemented. So yeah.
So question mark, when would this go in, like in the timeline, and when get no data would be stopped won't be served?
Well, we can make some promises now. I mean, I guess we would like to have it like in as soon as possible. For us, it is really simple to like in Geth to make this change. So we can literally just release like this protocol version next week. It doesn't change anything. It only changes that there's this new version available. And then removing the version 66 will be a bigger step. And we feel like, yeah, we'd be optimistic about maybe like the autumn or so, or the very.
Yeah, not gonna happen before merge.
Yeah, definitely not for the merge. This is for much later. We just want to set this process in motion. We have been talking about this forever, and we just want to like, this is like the next step on the way toward removing this feature. So yeah.
So in terms of defining the protocol as that, I'm fine. In terms of like phasing out ETH66, could we have a guarantee that we have a discussion before that? And
Yeah. It doesn't mean it will go away tomorrow. We are not. We are definitely open to discussing it.
In terms of the dates, because we are planning, we're actively working on it. I think we will be ready for the autumn to stop using it, no data. Not sure if we'll be ready to serve data for SnapSync, which is the harder one. But yeah, so I'm fine with general idea and general direction.
Okay. So I don't know what this means in ETH terms. Is it like anything needed?
I guess can we just discuss that offline for the ETH
Yeah,
process?
we will.
Just because, yeah. But
yeah,
okay,
there's
no
time.
objections to the new protocol. We're not deprecating ETH66 now. Yeah.
Hey, yeah, this is Basu. Just to clarify what Gary was saying, we're fine with the new protocol version. It's the deprecating of the old one that gives us a little bit of pause.
Okay, and we can discuss that well after
Yep.
the merge.
Yep, no problem.
Cool. Okay, moving on. Sorry, just to make sure we at least give other folks the opportunity to speak. Green Lucid was the GitHub handle. I'm not sure who that maps to on the call, but wanted to discuss get feedback on EIP 5022, which increases the cost for STOR when you go from a 0 to non-zero value. Are you on the call, Rindusid? Once, twice. Okay, I will post their issue in the chat here if people want to chime in and eat magicians. One thing I did mention, so the issues phrased for like Shanghai inclusion, I reiterated that we've kind of paused this decisions there, but then they said they would just like to get technical feedback on the EIP. So yeah, folks who are interested can have a look there. And then last up, we had, I can't even pronounce this handle, Xin Belf. Hopefully I got it right. Oh, well, perfect. Walk us through your presentation. We can't hear you though. Oh.
Yeah, hi, my name is Zion Joe or Victor, and then a quick presentation for the question, early feedback wanted for the team. So basically the proposal is to get a expiration in the payload. And one question, one valuable feedback I got from Mikhail is the potential of denial of attack if exposed to basically someone is possible to throw a very quick, soon to expire transaction and get it propagate over the network and cause a denial of service attack. Now, my question for the group, I know we're very. Go ahead.
What's expire by? What is this expire by?
It is expire by is a block number that like proposed that we add a new a field in the payload for a transaction, and for that block to be valid, all transactions has to not expire. So expire by is a block number requirement. Yeah. And then, so if let's say block number is 100, and then someone throws in a transaction with the 101 with a high transaction fee, and so it is possible that it get propagate over the network, but then soon to expire, and then within 101 and 102 didn't get executed at all, and could that cause a denial of service attack? That's the first question. And so I put a bunch of questions here. First of all, is that really a problem? Because for me, it's like, it's very natural that some of transactions become invalid in the network for various reasons. And expire by is just one of the reasons it comes invalid. And so the argument was that attacker can have very low cost to generate a cross network attack by have a low expire by number specified. But for me, my argument is that it seems like if they want to attack, there's also risking some fees. And so that's one thing. And the second thing is that I have some network layers of proposal. And my question to the implementer of clients is, to the client authors is that whether or not nodes are incentivized to adopt a counter DOS approach at all. I believe they are, but if they don't.
So this proposal that is this your EP? Because
it is 5081.
I know that Nick Johnson once upon a time made an EP proposal about expiry on transactions. I know this because I also made one like a year after and had forgotten that he had made one. So there are at least two previous attempts on this. I don't think there's anything like dramatically preventing that, like from a node implementer point of view, saying that, oh, we really cannot do this because then we get lost. Yeah, Michael may want to. I just think this has not been picked up because there have always been other stuff, more interesting modifications on transactions that have been on the table. And this has kind of been seen as a nice to have. That's
I
just
thought
a
in
quick 5 cents.
I'm surprised you hear this say that, Martin, because I could have sworn you were the person that argued fairly strongly that DOS vectors from expiring transactions were a problem, because someone can span the network and be confident that they and not have to pay for it, and be confident that they won't have to pay for it if they can avoid getting included within, nblocks.
No, I don't think I made that. So there are other transaction types which I rejected because for that reason. There were, for example, the batch ones where you can do this kind of thing. But for expiring ones, I mean, we already have right now the case where there are like big activity, thousands of people sending in transactions, but instead of them being expired and can be rejected and flushed out, they just have to slog through the system in like days after this big event, and they all fail. They cost a little bit, but they just hog the bandwidth. So yeah, in that case, I think it would be nice to have expire.
I agree that expiring transactions are super useful, and I would love to figure out a way to get them in. My concern, which I thought was actually your concern, but I will say it as mine since apparently I was wrong there, is that currently, if you submit a transaction, you have no way to purge it from the mempool. And there are some people out there who have insanely large mempools and can store basically everything forever. And so if you force the network to propagate your transaction, you are nearly guaranteed you will eventually have to pay for that transaction. Like it is never free. Like you will have to pay for that or some other transaction that replaces it later, but that's going to have, that 12.5% increase. And so there's a very limited amount. So given an account or a set of accounts that have just enough gas for one transaction each, you basically can spam, once, maybe twice, and then the fees start getting too expensive. Whereas expiring transactions, you can spam quite a bit if you're really good at throwing transactions in the pool that are
but
very
then
unlikely
the
to
nodes,
mine.
But the nodes can always choose to not. If he sees that this will expire in 5 seconds, it can just stop relaying it.
Sure, but I mean, you could just have 1,000 accounts that each have enough gas for one transaction, and they expire in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that. And I mean, if you're good with the base fee, you can look at base fee history, and you can do a little bit of math and figure that it's unlikely the base fee is going to drop, because this is a Monday afternoon. Monday afternoons it never drops below 20 or whatever, and so just set to 19 or something.
So sorry, yeah, we're already a bit over time, and so I guess what's the best place for people to comment? Do you mind sharing that in the chat as well?
Yeah, the best way is to share on the it's Magicians, which is also appear on the IP discussion too, as usual.
Okay, awesome. And one thing I'll highlight from the chat, Light Client had 2 comments about like 4337 and 3074s being ways you could also support this feature, basically. So it's probably worth to look at those and see if they're like a good replacement, because like Martin was saying, even if there are no DOS concerns, there's still like a high chance that there's just higher priority EIPs that end up taking most of the work, and 4337 specifically is not the core EIP, so it means that basically clients can implement it and not require changes to the consensus protocol. And I'm pretty sure Nethermind already has support for this in at least one project.
I see. Yeah, that actually answered a good question of mine, which is whether we need a new transaction type, or can we reuse the existing transaction type and append a new one. And it seems like if people want backward compatibility, it has to be a new one, so that some of them, if they don't want to adopt it sooner, then they can just avoid seeing it, using it.
Yeah, and yeah, I would recommend, Micah, if you want to share your EIP number. Yours was basically that, if I remember correctly, it was like a new transaction type with an expiring transaction, so that might be helpful to look at as well. 2711. We're already over time, so yeah, I guess we'll wrap this up. yeah, thank you for the presentation as well. This is the higher budget quality EIP presentations that we had. And yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I've posted the TTD value in the Allcore Devs chat, so we can use that for releases on Robston. And I guess we'll expect to put a blog post together sometime in the next 2 weeks. And yeah, and then we'll figure out all the stuff about the beacon chains for testnets on the consensus layer calls if it's not already done before then. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice
Thanks,
weekend.
everyone.
Thank you.